Evening all on PlayChess and streaming to YouTube. Okay. Yeah, we're going to carry on from last week. So we're looking at Fischer at the Interzonal in 1970. So last week's video, by the way, is on YouTube, and that was the first 4 rounds. And I'm going systematically, round by round, not discriminating any game, just taking it as they come. So we're looking at draws as well, because they could be very hard contested draws, knowing Fischer. Okay, so this round is now round 5. So you can see rounds 1 to 4, as I say, on the previous video. Hi Tom, Tom Villiers is here from one of my chess clubs. Hi Tom. So okay, yeah, this game Fischer was playing black against Vladimir Hort. Okay, very, very strong player. And Hort played e4. Okay, and we'll put on the Kibitzer actually. Might as well put on the Kibitzer right now. We'll add Stockfish. So Fischer played the Sicilian defense. And we see knight c3. So is this going to be a closed Sicilian? Now usually, okay, d6 was played. Usually white, wanting to play the closed Sicilian, I believe, would usually play g3. Although maybe I'm getting this wrong here. After d6, I think there might be a finesse. In Livebook, apparently this is the most popular move. So I just want to check this out for myself. f4 is the second most popular, and g3 third. Maybe it's against d6. Against knight c6 then. Again, yeah, knight f3 is still quite popular, or g3. So, okay, I guess we can say this move, knight f3, white doesn't mind about blocking the f-pawn. This is still an interesting position. And we see now Fischer playing a6. And now white actually, instead of playing d4, I think it's often used to play d4 though, sort of transpositional trick. White actually played g3 now. Okay. Now, knight c6 was played, bishop g2. And here, the most common move, actually, and maybe this is a little bit of controversy here, 177 games in Livebook to play e6 in this position, e6. And there's only actually 31 with Fischer's move, which is bishop g4. In a sense, this is more committal. Wouldn't you have thought, to give up the light square bishop? Potentially. Okay, you're strengthening the weak, the dark square pressure, but it's a little bit more on the committal side. How does white handle it? Well, white actually, perhaps, well, he kicked the knight immediately, actually. So why is this? I think d3 might be actually possible. I don't think there's anything too badly wrong with d3. I mean, did the bishop have to be kicked immediately? I don't think black's in a position necessarily to do any damage here. Like this position, we can kick that bishop. This seems okay for white. But anyway, the bishop was kicked immediately, and Fischer took immediately. So it's a highly committal decision in a way to give up the light squared bishop. But yeah, the dark square play would seem interesting. So g6 carries on the dark square play to put pressure on these dark squares. And often black is also playing for b5, b4 to increase the grip on the dark squares. We see here now d3. Already there's an interesting move actually, which might be interesting. h4, which might be interesting as well actually to consider. But yeah, d3, keeping it seemingly solid. Okay, bishop g7. Now here, this looks quite interesting. Now, okay, black seems intent at some point in stretching out with b5, and white tries to prevent that now with this move a4. So we see that b4, of course, has been compromised. And again, it's not actually using the asset of the light square bishop from a technical angle. We just put this back for a moment and look at this h4, which is an engine suggestion actually, because I think it's got something going for it for the light square bishop. That's why I'm interested in just having a quick look at this position. Can white do anything with this asset? And put it back. This kind of position might be a very aggressive approach. This is actually an engine line, but you can see here that maybe this is more dangerous for black. Maybe f4, f5 later. Maybe this bishop would be good on diagonal. It's just a different way of playing it. An ultra aggressive setup could have been used by white to try and celebrate the bishop pair. But okay, he plays a4 after e6 now. Yeah, black is doing quite nicely, it seems, in this position. I think a4 is actually a slight weakening move, to be honest. Okay, bishop g2, knight ge7. Both sides castle. Bishop e3. And now we get a strange looking move again here, that it would seem in a lot of cases black would want to play rook b8 for b5, b4. I'm not sure how well this goes down in this position. Fischer's move is odd, actually. I mean, I would say that's kind of thematic looking, but of course you're giving white that a file later. But I don't know how many of you would play this. If you were playing black, what would you play in this position if I gave you 20 seconds here? So you're playing black, you're taking Bobby Fischer's position here. What would you play as black here? Any ideas? Hi, I hope I haven't lost the volume level. I had something. I hope it's not to do with my microphone. All right. Well, if we did play rook b8, actually, this is quite curious. Is Fischer playing like a computer? If we did play rook b8, maybe this isn't that effectual here. Like this, if we played b5, this might not be that effectual, this position. But anyway, it seems Fischer's playing the computer move, like Stockfish. What would Stockfish play here? After this bishop e3, he actually played queen a5, which is Stockfish's top choice. So with it is what is actually going on here? Is black actually threatening something like potentially queen b4, or what is actually going on here? Okay, let's see. White felt compelled to bring the bishop back to d2 to target the queen. So I guess there might be some possibilities of queen b4, but actually this is a raw, like, materialistic move in a sense that black actually might dare just to take on c3. I hope the volume's gone back. Sorry, I heard some microphone thing. Black might actually be playing to take on c3 here. I mean, seriously, doesn't this look a little bit on the materialistic side? If queen d2, okay, there's no immediate problem there though. But yeah, the bishop dropped back here. Maybe on queen d2 it's comfortable for black anyway. So the bishop actually dropped back, and now the queen just went to c7. So he's kind of gained the move in a way, putting the queen here, taking the bishop away from d4 control. The queen might be useful down that c file later, but in particular I think he's accelerated a strategic break of this c4 move, which could be quite painful to white's pawn structure. That's the base of the exploitable base here, with the queen just slightly improved there and the bishop slightly maybe worse. Maybe black has just won a little bit of something there. And we see, yeah, this is a nice grip on the dark squares. Oh, okay, hold on. Oh, the volume's low, is it? Microphone. Sorry about this. I heard something go on there. Nope. I don't know. I don't know why it'll be low actually now. No idea. No idea how to fix that. Someone said it was okay now. I'm sorry if the volume's low. Anyone else? Okay, so white played Queen B1, which looks kind of passive. Black still got that grip on the dark squares. We have now Knight D4, very, very comfortable looking position for black here. So that little subtlety, Queen A5, back to C7. Yeah. Oh dear. Okay, we've got a low volume thing. Okay. I'm not really sure what to do about that. Moving all the time. Really mess things up. I need a new laptop at this rate. Sorry. How now? In the next minute? Oh dear. Sorry. Sorry for that. How is the volume now? How's the volume now? Is it terrible? I could try and find another. Right, I'll try and find another. Now it's good and I just messed it up again. Great. Oh dear. Now, sorry, testing 1, 2, 3. I might have to start again. Dear, oh dear. I don't know. Okay. It's a shame. Volume now on Play Chess. On Play Chess. No volume on Play Chess. USB can take it off. Mouse. As well, okay. Here. I should start going back. Okay. Sound now. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Voice ready to use. 1. Okay, 1 2 3. Yeah. Oh, there's some there. Okay, but just on play chess, I've messed things up. Okay. Yeah. Okay. No sound on play chess. I don't know what to do about that. If I go to settings or something, stop and set up, start, testing sound. We have to go right to the beginning of this game. Can I get actually sound is back on play chess? Okay, we got sound back. So we're 24 minutes in, so just scrap the last 24 minutes. We're going to have a good revision session now of this game. Yeah, why did I do this? Okay. Good evening all on Play Chess and streaming to YouTube. Yes, we're going to carry on from last week. And we're going to carry on looking at the Palma de Mallorca Interzonal tournament in 1970. Now the first 4 rounds are on YouTube. If you want to search for that video, if you just search for Fischer 1970, you should be able to find the different parts, and that part 1 should be there. So this will be part 2. We're going to look in particular at least 3 key games, maybe 4 if there's enough enthusiasm and energy for 4. So, right, now in round 5, yes, we were ambitious to look at 4 last week. In round 5, Vladimir Hort was playing Fischer and kicked off with e4. So a formidable opponent. Fischer played the Sicilian defence and we saw knight c3. Fischer played d6 and now we see the move knight f3. So this can be a transpositional trick. It's not necessarily playing into a closed Sicilian. And in fact, this is more common than g3 to play knight f3. Now Fischer plays the move a6 in this position. So that's a little bit on the curious side to play a6, you might think. The most usual move is knight c6, actually, over 2,000 games. Knight f6 is popular, e6, but Fischer played a6, slightly rarer. Now we have the move g3, knight c6, bishop g2. Fischer goes for dark square control now, a little bit on the controversial side. It's a little bit of a rare move, bishop g4. The idea to take out a knight to reinforce dark square control. Now often black in this position is actually playing e6, actually hemming in the bishop, playing it slightly differently. Just to show you, for example, like this is often a common setup for black, and we have a kind of a different setup as an alternative, but Fischer's play more keeps the lock and key on the d4 square, so he plays this bishop g4 instead, keeping the bishop outside, ready and willing to take on f3. White now takes time to play h3, so white gets the bishop pair. Is this going to be dangerous? Black plays g6, so white's lost the ability, of course, to play d4, and in fact black is strengthening the grip on that d4 square. We see now black's common plan is often b5, b4. White tries to prevent that now with a4. Creates a slight weakness of the b4 square. We see now also potentially, as I mentioned in preparing for this video, that possibly there's a more aggressive way of white playing this entirely. This is an engine line I'm about to show you. If white wanted to try and celebrate the bishop pair, there might have been a method like this, fianchettoing the bishop back and playing to castle queenside. It's a bit crazy looking, but it's interesting, but maybe a bit too risky to castle queenside. But we see here a position which might be getting a little bit passive for white because of that dark square grip. We see bishop g2, knight ge7, both sides castling, bishop e3, and now let's move queen a5, which actually does threaten, it seems bishop takes c3. That is the threat. Fischer gains what seems to be a valuable tempo here. On queen d2, that looks plausible to play queen d2, but maybe this is interesting for black, this position. It seems black would be comfortable here in any case. Maybe with knight d4 coming, it looks even more comfortable potentially. So white actually retracted his bishop, and now Fischer put his queen on c7. And there's a structural break threat of c4 in some variations here, just to try and cause damage to this pawn structure, but not in this position. c4 here, I think, is not such a big deal. Maybe white can actually just take that here and play this. There isn't too much damage there. But okay, we see knight d4, a5. Now this is quite committal, a5 actually, but black is now preparing b5, which white was trying to discourage b5. The downside of putting a pawn on a5, it could be vulnerable in the future, or even immediately it seems vulnerable. Knight ec6 hits the pawn, so white protects the pawn. But now a very, very powerful move. I wonder if you can guess it if I give you 20 seconds here in this position. And also you'll note with knight d1, it seems as though white might also consider c4, so bear that in mind. So what does black play here? If you were playing black, what would you do in this position if I gave you 20 seconds starting from now? What would you play here? Any ideas? Black's playing. Okay, yeah, so we can actually use the strategic break here to try and break this pawn chain. Now, why is it so dangerous here compared to before? Well, we're about to find out. D takes c4, knight e5. Now in this position, the bishop's hanging, isn't it? Because also there's knight f3. So if we try and play b3, I think the bishop's hanging. Ouch, we just lose the bishop. So yes, it's under better circumstances than before that it's impossible to defend c4 here with b3. So bishop e3 is played. So already Fischer has secured something here positionally. It seems as though he's got nice pressure on this pawn, and white's a little bit awkward now. Rook a4, rook ac8, and white actually gives up the dark squared bishop in this position. Yeah, he gives up the dark square bishop with bishop takes d4. This knight's just too much of a menace, I think. Bishop takes d4. And we have queen a2. So a little bit on the passive side for this pawn. Bishop goes back to f6. Actually, what was white threatening there? Maybe, yeah. There's an idea here that white is actually, look at that. White is actually threatening b3. So the bishop retracts away from this, I think, b3 threat by playing here. So without losing the bishop on d4, b3 could be handled. But now white actually tries to strengthen this a5 pawn by putting pawns here and here. But we're going to get a backwards c pawn. And so we have c3. But now this pawn is victimized, creating basically a backward c pawn. White has to try and defend that. So b4. So this torture can begin now with the backward c pawn. Fischer looks at it with the bishop f6. Rook e1. So white's position from the opening, it seems in disarray. It's not very well organized. There's a backward c pawn. It's not a major success for white. I wouldn't sort of say this is a great hack attack position where black's in mortal danger. It seems like black's going to inflict positional torture on white here. Rook fd8, queen e2. The scene is set. Okay, king g7. So now here, black might be preparing even d5 soon. The rook goes back. h5. And it looks as though h4 to try and intensify the dark square pressure is on the cards. You can't really have this position without the dark square bishop. f4 will be weaker. So white plays h4. I mean, if we look at this, I think that was needed. Let's have a look at another move. Say rook c2. We allow this h4. I just think this is unpleasant, this position. Look at the dark squares. Just positionally, it seems even more unpleasant. The bishop's having a great time. So h4 was played. That's kind of understandable then. Now we have queen d7, which affords the possibility more of d5 actually, and maybe d4 in the future. King h2. And that actually makes this a more attractive proposition, this move king h2. We see knight e5, rook c2, knight g4 check, king h1. And now rook c7, as though doubling is on the cards, just a double on that poor c pawn. Note also there's this forcing move, potential forcing move available, or annoying move generally, queen a4 in this position, which could come in handy. Bishop h3, the knight goes back. Knight e3. And now we do have this annoying move, queen a4. It is literally like an annoying looking move. White is getting kind of tortured around his backward c pawn here. It's spelling out that any c4, of course, we could take here. But this constant staring at the rook, this is annoying. Maybe even more than just annoying. Rook b1. And it's actually leveraged now with a small little tactic from Fischer. He plays actually knight c4, knowing that, you know, this knight takes, rook takes is possible for eyeing c2. If knight takes here, this is good for black. This position here, the infiltration is a bit painful, and we can actually pick up that backward pawn as well. So white actually played rook a2 to kick the queen away, goes back to c6, looking at the e4 pawn. So white protects the e4 pawn and taking on c4. Queen takes. We have an exchange. Okay, transitioning a bit into a miserable ending. Opposite colour bishops though, but terribly backward pawn. White tries to dissolve some pawns now. Of course his e4 pawn is hanging. He's going to lose a pawn at this stage, whatever he does now. So he accepts that and maybe thinks there might be some hope in the opposite coloured bishops. So he plays b5. Now Fischer's a pawn up and he's also eyeing a5. Takes, rook b6. But white is getting a potentially dangerous a pawn. Potentially dangerous. So we have an exchange of the e pawn for the a pawn. Rook takes e4. Rook takes a6. But an interesting thing here is in the centre, black has these extra centre pawns. If this pawn can be blockaded like this, in theory, then we have these pawns coming through the centre, in theory. Check. And then we have d5. Rook c6. So yes, but now we have rook, a very tactical move in the circumstance. Probably the strongest move by a little bit, even from an engine perspective, is that there's a flip up between Fischer's move and bishop d4, which is simpler. But rook a1 is liked by the engines. Just trying to get another pair of rooks off. If the rook refuses here, I think we can just take. We can just play d4, and this pawn looks to be doomed actually. Or no, it's this pawn is winning, d3, and then d2, queening. So yes, we have an exchange of rooks. Other things don't seem that useful. We have an exchange of rooks. Then a6. So this is a good blockade square if this bishop can come back. And then we can use these pawns in the centre. So that's the theory of it. Once you blockade a pawn here, it's like getting an extra passed pawn from nothing. Well, compared to the opponent. Neutralising the opponent's passed pawn with the blockade. So a6 we see bishop d4. Brilliant blockade square. Also putting pressure on f2. White defends f2 here by playing actually rook c2. I think the alternative to defend here, king g2, doesn't help too much. Rook a8 doesn't help the situation that much. Black's doing nicely here, but the king's coming out anyway. f4, rook b8, rook a2. Now here the blockade is set up, bishop a7. So we've got this potentially useful winning d pawn, bishop f1. So how does black make progress from here? Is white actually threatening anything? White's not really threatening that much here at the moment. Although you notice all the pawns are on light squares, same colour as the bishop. So there could be some opportunities for that bishop to be dangerous. King e7, king g2, king d6, bishop d3. So already putting a break on any f6 plan. That's fine. But this is still an advantage for black. Rook b3, bishop e2. Now f6 is playable, and it is played here, but this pawn chain here is a target for the light square bishop. So white tries to get the bishop d3 possibility back by playing rook d2. He wants to play bishop d3 and hit this pawn chain, or force a concession like f5. Rook a3, bishop d3 is played. Fischer's not too concerned here. But if he does play f5, it will make it harder to win this, I believe. He actually plays a much stronger move in this position than f5. He actually plays bishop e3. Okay, rook d1. And now check. King f3. And the king's quite awkward there, because now, after bishop d4, white is threatened with a mate in 1. So he can't take this pawn. We have a move which breaks up white's pawn structure a little bit to give white the g3 square. And you might think, well, did white actually have to do that here? Why on earth did white just do that? It wasn't much better if the king wasn't going to f3. Just to rewind that for a moment. This position, and what else? I mean, king h1, we can actually just play G5. G5 is good here. It's supported by the bishop. This is nice. This is nice for black. And then we've got two pass pawns in the center. So, okay, the king had come to f3. So bishop d4, threatening that mate in 1. G4. It's still difficult for white. Rook a3. Okay, and now bishop e3. So not minding bishop takes g6 here, because we're going to take this f pawn now. King f3. Bishop c5, pinning the bishop again. So this looks a little bit awkward for white. What is white actually doing? Can't move too many bits here. And in fact, I'm not even sure rook d2 is possible. Rook d2 here is just losing to e5, I think. So white has to be very careful. White played king g3. We have e5. For the moment, of course, there's bishop takes e4. It's not a total threat at the moment. F takes, king g2. Sorry, when this is now unpinned. It's now unpinned, so there's bishop e4 here. If e4, we can just take there, surely, yes. So Fischer plays here, h takes g4. So g4 has been swapped for g6. But now we get a similar plan, funny enough, on the other side of the board. What we've just witnessed was a useful blockade of the a pawn to increase the centre pawn advantage. Oh, you're joking. Oh, don't tell me sound's gone again. Is sound okay now? Oh, I've just heard that dreadful... I think I might need a new computer or something. New mic? Oh dear. I hope sounds okay. Okay, fine. Good. This is scary. So rook takes a6. We need now to blockade here. This is a blockade point for this pawn to carry on pressing the centre pawns down the board. So that's the general plan. Blockade and use your own pawn. So king g3, king e6, h5. So the blockade just in time now on h6, the other side of the board. There's a nice artistic pattern to this game. Takes, check. So now we can blockade on h6. Oh dear. Now, okay, hold on a sec. I'll just give it a few seconds. In a few seconds, you should be getting it back. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, back. Okay, there's a 20-second delay on any sound change that I make. There's always a 20-second delay. Sound is very low. Oh, yeah. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. I need to sort out how that works without any interference. Okay. All right. So we got a blockade on h6. So we've got our two centre pawns. Again, we're going to have another go with the two centre pawns now with this blockade on the h pawn. Again, opposite come the bishops. So what happens here? Stop on there. Okay. So here we see rook b1, and now finally the pawns can make progress. Again, e4 check, king g3. Rook a3 check. Black is now flowing a bit more now in the position with the king herding the pawns here. So these double blockades, you know, from there and there have worked. White's having big difficulties just handling the centre pawns now. Rook a1, and this is threatening the horrible Rook g1 check to restrict the king. We've got some nearly we've got opposition here. Check, king d4. Now this pawn's very important though now, and we've also got some other serious threats. King f5, check. This really helps black because after king e6, this pawn is actually really lethal now in this position. e3 is played, and white actually resigns here. Let's see if king here. Let's say white resigns, but if king there, I think the pawn can be shepherded with rook f2. I think this will do for e2, and then we can block the bishop with the bishop to queen. So this would be very, very difficult to handle. If check, sorry, we're going that way. We just take. Pardon me. No. So yeah, this is impossible. King c2, e2. So yeah, this is how to win opposite coloured bishops there. And let's just have a look at that in slow motion. It was a 75 mover, so quite a grueling positional grind. In a nutshell, what were the key points? Okay, key point 1, Fischer wasn't afraid to give up the bishop for the knight. He's in the first plan, he's increasing his pressure on the dark squares. In the second little plan, there's a little nuance here that was used, which is intriguing, that I think a lot of players wouldn't have even considered, which was queen a5 to cause a nuisance, to gain a tempo here, which caused white's pieces to be a little bit on the more passive side. Now, after a5, we have here a potential target actually after a5, but if that wasn't played, then b5 was actually on the cards for b4, and this knight's like a real menace in any case. So black's already got a dominating position. It seems, you know, the two bishops, the bishop here is not doing much in this game. So white ends up with having to get basically a backward pawn, because now there's a very powerful strategic break which gives a backward pawn to white, essentially. This c2 pawn is a backward pawn, and it's brought out here. There was a threat of b3 in this position, a key threat of b3 to win material. That was taken account of, bishop f6. But now this backward pawn on c3 is emphasized here. White's got this fixed chain here, and Fischer maneuvered around the backward pawn here. A few tickling maneuvers here with queen a4, and then this knight c4, which was actually threatening, by the way, knight a3. So we have rook a2 to kick the queen out. If it had taken, we had queen takes c2 there. So yeah, the queen was kicked out, and we're still left with Fischer now winning a pawn from his positional advantage. If white hadn't taken on c3, so he's ended up in a very bad position here. Possibly the engine's indicating rook c1 could have been the most stubborn resistance here, but it seems unlikely this position. Say here, this seems an unlikely scenario to actually be able to defend. We're actually looking at d4 now as a threat. This looks actually quite horrible, but possibly a little bit more stubborn than the game to give up that pawn instead. But what we have in the game is white going a pawn down. So white starts to be like material down. He's a pawn down because of this double attack. But we have the opposite colour bishops, so there's still a bit of a grinding job to do here. So white gets this a pawn, and black's got the centre pawns. It's the centre pawns which are the long-term project for black. So he exchanges off a pair of rooks tactically, blockades white's a pawn, and then he's making a little bit of progress, but this bishop's going to be a nuisance on this part of the pawn chain, as we saw. Okay, so he carefully prepares a tactical insertion of bishop e3 at some point here, so he can play this for this g5 if needed. So check, threatening mate here, rook here. So he's forced this concession for white, namely g4, very important concession to weaken white's pawn chain. So the end result here is that black's going to end up with 2 pawns in the center pretty soon. Black ends up with 2 pawns in the center after e5. So it doesn't matter about losing g6 for g4, because we can also blockade this one on h6 with this bishop later. So we end up with 2 central pawns without much compensation from white. So 2 center pawns emerge. We have a blockade set up on h6. So this is great positional play, because now the center pawns can come flooding through here. This looks as though it's a roller coaster now. It's just they're crashing through like pretty evil space invaders. These pawns are crashing through. The king's on the wrong side of the pawn, and e3 is now decisive. So I don't know how many of you have seen that game before. Is that a quick appreciation of this Fischer game in round 5? Did anyone get anything from that? So yeah, I thought that was great positional play. One of the more interesting games. Probably never to be covered on YouTube because it's a long game. Most annotators, they veer away from 75 move games. But there's fantastic technique here in this game. I mean, it's got to be said. This is fantastic technique of how to slowly use the advantage of a backward pawn transitioning into 2 center pawns with blockades on both sides of the board at some point. So, okay, should we go on to the next round? We'll go on to the next round. The next round is a trivial game by comparison. So that was like a positional mammoth masterpiece. This game is more trivial. So it was against Samuel Rozewski. So Samuel Rozewski was playing white against Fischer. So a fellow American player. They had some serious rivalry and ego issues, it seems. For example, after their match, I think in the 1960s, they both wanted to always play board 1. So they hardly ever played on the same team, I think. I suspect because of that. There were some egotistical clash issues. But anyway, so Samuel Rozewski played d4. We see knight f6. c4, c5, and yes, now white plays knight f3, and Fischer doesn't mind this position, particularly after knight f3. It seems actually, if we look at this, d5 is actually more commonly played here. So knight f3, black took, knight takes d4. Usually black plays knight c6 here. Fischer played e6, and it looks as though, yeah, I'm surprised, because actually the most common move, well, they're actually of equal statistical importance, it seems, on Livebook. g3 and knight c3, they've both been played about 1800 games each, actually. But some of you, I don't know, some of you might have a tendency to believe that knight c3 here doesn't look too hot because of this pin with bishop b4. Actually, in this position, knight c6 is more common to play, over 2,500 games. Bishop b4, 700 games. So is it as annoying as all that? You could consider that if white gets double pawns, this bishop could be good on d6 later. So this could be a major problem here. It could backfire this whole thing potentially. But the move here is very, very rare. White, usually over 1,300 games with g3, okay, not minding double pawns there, 179 bishop d2, knight here, that's been played 118, but what was played is only 15 games. I think this is a sort of basically a novelty move, e3, and somehow it doesn't look that convincing to me, this position. It looks like a friendly Nemzo Indian now after knight e4. White's looks to be suffering a bit. He plays queen c2, knight takes c3, so fracturing the pawn structure. Bishop e7. This position here looks as though black's mostly equalized. I just want to check that just for my own interest here, I don't believe in this position for white that much. Can we just rewind just for a moment here? Instead of e3, I think so there must be a reason this is more common. If g3 here, if we follow knight e4, this position there's queen d3, for example. This position has been played here with, yeah, it's meant to be about equal as well, but maybe a little bit less of an issue using this tactical pin. So this position here might be slightly better from what we see in this game. That's the more theoretical approach now, it seems, to play g3. So just for those interested, so bishop b4, g3 seems to be more statistically used. We see e3, so we'll go back to this position. So black seems to be doing quite well here. A6, and that looks at first glance kind of pointless because, you know, white has that bind on b5. So what is the idea of that? Well, it's just to keep the knight out of b5, not necessarily to play b5, because the knight eyeing d6, that could be a problem on this file. So f4, which looks hyper aggressive actually, just to play for f5 maybe one day. In fact, after d6, this is a very aggressive plan here indeed. White could positionally just go for the backward pawn. The engine suggestion is bishop a3, and I guess we could target after d6. This is another way of playing the position, just to target d6. For some reason, you know, white played very aggressively here with f5. It's leaving some weak pawns behind. It's leaving the e5 square behind. Technically, just instantly after f5, black is technically better actually from an engine perspective. I don't know if that shocks anyone. Actually, can I just ask that? I know this is a weird question to ask, but would anyone think f5 is a terrible move to play? Would you have played f5 in this position, or would you have done something else? So, what do you think about f5 here? Because there's some other alternatives actually to put either pressure on the b file, or you could try and soften black up, or you could even play bishop a3. I wonder how many of you would do f5. What do you think about this position? Is f5 any good? Let's get a comment on it. All right, I think it looked a bit suspect, but let's see. Okay. So f5, and now it looks also a little bit odd when I played through the game. When I initially played through a lot of games, though, they seem like random chaos. Okay. And this did seem like chaos to me, to not play e5 but to play e takes f5. The engine suggestion is actually just to play e5 here. It looks simple. It looks simple to do this. Why not? Fischer must have seen some issue with it, because this looks like a good position where there doesn't seem to be any kingside attack, etc. He actually played what seems to be a more awkward move, e takes f5. So let's see the logic behind this. Knight takes f5. Okay, maybe he's got potential pressure on the e file, which could come useful later. Bishop takes f5 was played. Queen takes. Now knight d7. Yes, I think it just must be opening. He prefers a more open game here, but he's given up his light square bishop. Bishop f3. Now the engine suggests this position should be about equal, or maybe a tiny bit better for black. Queen c7, rook b1. You can see the bishop's not too bad at the moment. Rook a b8, bishop d5. Again, it's being a bit naughty, that bishop. So knight f6. And now white just plays bishop a3. He doesn't mind his pawns being undoubled. He's targeting d6 now. Or maybe even there's queen takes d5 to target d6. Rook f e8. Queen drops back to d3. And now, actually this might be a major mistake, dropping back to d3. In this position, apparently it was about equal. If white had played something like queen f3, this position here, we've got pressure now on b7, and we might even be able to take here. This is a different story here. This seems okay still, maybe a tiny bit better for black. On the other hand, there are miserable looking weaknesses. It's maybe white's got more weaknesses than black, so I'm not entirely sure. I think that might be a bit more favourable for black actually. So okay, but queen d3. We have now knight takes d5. Okay, c takes d5, undoubling the pawns, yes, but leaving that horrible backward pawn, this one as well. This one's now fixed more with b5, fixing that c pawn, and bishop f6 is now on the cards. I don't think white, this is such a worry. We can just target that with bishop f6. But actually here, after e4, this might be a concern. It wasn't played. Bishop f8, more passive looking, bishop f8 was played in this position by Fischer. Let's have a quick look at bishop f6. There's a snag. Yes, there is a snag. Rook takes is more powerful here because of check. And bishop takes d6. That is quite a significant snag, which would be a nuisance for Fischer indeed. e5, and white's got compensation for the exchange sack. So Fischer avoided that, it seems. He didn't want to take that risk. He played bishop f8 instead. And we have here still black is better, and maybe he can just get the torture on c3 like this, sidestepping any sacrifice on f6. So we see rook b4, where white is now considering c4 to break this bind. So we see in response to that, rook e5 to prepare to double rooks on e4. So that's an idea, or queen e7 to put pressure on e4. c4 is played, and we see a swap of the e pawn for the b pawn, basically a transaction with this move. So black prepared to swap the b pawn for the e pawn, an exchange of prisoners, as Nimzowitsch would say in my system. C takes, A takes. But for the moment here, white actually played king h1. King h1 was played here. Let's have a quick look at this. If rook takes b5, no, actually this looks as though black's doing quite well in this position, because there's things like this. So it looks a little bit uncomfortable. In fact, that sort of move loses the a pawn immediately. So you can see that might be why white was interested in a little bit of prophylaxis on this diagonal here, because there's some loose bits around. So this move first, king h1, was played, king h1. Okay, so we see now queen e7, so ganging up on that poor pawn, and I think white has to take now on b5. If he plays this, I think we just have f5 here, just using the treble pressure. We're going to win e4 whatever happens here, and this will be even worse, I think. If we take here, we can this is a nice position. So okay, after king h1, queen e7, queen takes b5. So finally this exchange of prisoners, the exchange of weaknesses. Rook takes e4, rook takes, queen takes e4. Still, black, from an engine perspective, is only fractionally better. I'm talking less than half a pawn, or even less than 0.30. Black is fractionally better here, and white seems to play a very aggressive logical move, queen d7. So threatening queen takes f7, check. So that's the threat. And this next move from Fischer is very good here. Very, very good. And it causes a terrible mistake, I think. What would you play here with black? If I give you 20 seconds to pause, not to pause the video, because you can't. Sorry, this is a live stream. 20 seconds from now, what would you play as black? So black to play here. Alright, so some suggestions on play chess for Queen E1. That might be interesting. It wasn't what black played though. Okay, and there's a suggestion for Rook E7, G6. No, G6 loses. Adam Rocket, G6 loses naughty, doesn't it? So, some of these I'm pretty sure might lose. Let's have a look. G6. No, that's a mate in 6. We just take here and Bishop B2. End of game. It's mating. Okay, no, not G6. I don't think Queen E1 either. Same reason. Queen takes F7 check. And actually here we can play Queen takes F8 winning a piece because we can take here. So rule that out as well. Rook E7 is a very interesting one actually. Because on Queen takes D6 there's Rook E8, and we're actually skewing the Queen and Bishop, which means that if here we just take here and winning, actually this position is winning for black. It's a very interesting one, but white can play Queen G3 to protect the Bishop, and this position is only fractionally better, if anyone's better, for black. But what Fischer played is probably the strongest move. It's Queen F4, trying to use that back row issue, okay, and protecting F7. And white played a disastrous move now. Yeah, surprising. White should have played here Queen B5 to protect the rook. So Queen B5. Actually threatens takes because then check we can block on F1 back. So Queen B5, this would have been the move to defend here, and there would still be a fight going on, but white played actually in this position the move King G1, which is a disaster, actually a total disaster. Can you see a winning maneuver for black? What does black to play and win here? So can you see what black can do to play and win here all of a sudden? It's fascinating because it shows how weak, how delicate king safety is as an issue, how very delicate king safety can be as an issue. So black to play and win here. I don't know if Thomas, you should be able to see it, shouldn't you? ECF 190 ish, more. Yes. Oh dear. There's a subtle little nuance, discernment here going on between the really strong tactical players and maybe the slightly less strong, alert tactical players. There's a slight nuance. Okay, I'm going to show. Okay, this is quite interesting. Now, if you get 100 points for Queen E3, but 500 for Queen D4, So why is there this difference? There's a difference because of the resource available to white. There's a difference. On queen e3, the resource available to white is rook f2. Yeah, white's not getting mated here with rook f2. He's still threatening queen takes f7. Black is doing very well here though. It's approaching +4 in this particular position by playing rook e7. This position is pretty nasty because actually we've got this attack on the bishop, and if I don't know, if queen h3, this is still pretty bad. This position here, queen d4, with mate in one threat, and also rook e2 as a threat. But even stronger than the queen e3, even stronger, is queen d4. And yes, the thing is, there's no rook f2 resource here. If we play rook f2, then there's termination with rook e1 checkmate. So that's the big difference. Now after king h1, there's a crushing move here. Shall I let you guess it? Sorry, let's have another delay. So black to play here. What would you play with black here? Oh, some of you have already guessed it. Final move of the game here. Fischer to play. Yeah, it's the final move, so that's another special reason to ask. Yeah, so again, you know, we are threatened with queen f7. This defends and attacks. So we're using that back row issue. And if rook g1, we just play rook e1. And white's getting mated. He can't defend this g1 from anywhere. So that's mating white. So yeah, white just collapsed there from a position he was slightly worse. If we just rewind back earlier, yeah, this position he was just slightly worse around about here. After queen f4, if white played queen b5, then there'll be a bit more fight left in the game. Okay, but it was an interesting game nevertheless. Some structural damage inflicted on white early on in the opening. This f5 looked a bit on the dodgy side. There were other plans available here, such as bishop a3. You know, white didn't have to commit to this plan necessarily. There might have been d6 pressure, you know, to look forward to, but that would have been a different story, a different game. But anyway, so in the game, we see Fischer taking like this instead of e5, and it worked out well in the game. He had that nagging pressure, and that e-file did actually win for him in the end, tactically, for the rook e1 resource, if that had been played on. Okay, I hope you got something. Oh, we're on to grueling struggles. Okay, yes, okay, third game, maybe quite a good plays the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, knight c6, and this trendy move, which is anti-Sveshnikov, you know, Rosalimo system, bishop b5, was played by Fischer. g6, and I think the modern treatment nowadays is usually to immediately take on c6. I think that's the modern treatment now, which is often played. Statistically, over history, I think castles is more popular. Okay, Fischer's move is also quite popular. You know, knight c3 and c3 are other alternatives. Fischer played c3, so he wants to construct a centre. Bye, Thomas. Thanks for coming around. So white wants to construct a centre quite quickly, like a Roy Lopez. Knight f6, queen e2, and should black mind e5? No, he doesn't. Bishop g7, e5, knight d5, and now I'm not sure black is threatening anything major. I don't think this is a particular issue. White went for as well as attacking the d5 knight, and yeah, this looks like a highly risky strategy from Fischer. Highly risky, in fact, to do this. This looks like calculation to win a pawn, but giving black potentially huge positional blockade compensation. Huge. If queen takes c5 here immediately, b6, this doesn't look nice. The problem is black has a strong blockade now. Black now played queen d3. I don't know what you guys think of this position. Do you think white is okay, or do you think black's better, or do you think black's clearly better? Who do you think's better here? Do you think it was worth a pawn to do this? This doesn't look good to me personally, to do this. It looks like a high risk. It's a pawn up, but black also has the bishop pair to bear in mind. So Daniel Elessa says black is clearly better. Yeah, so Milan Matulovic, yeah, he didn't mind this position, it seems. The engine agrees actually that black is more than half a pawn up here. So I have no idea actually what Fischer was thinking to play like this, the opening. No idea. Maybe he's banking on queen e3. Black preserves the light square blockade. Doesn't mind the exchange of queens. Bishop f5. White takes. Bishop takes. It's still very annoying. King d1 now. So king d1 means knight e1 to maybe unblockade. Okay. But black is getting ready for that. Knight e6. Knight e1. Knight f4 now. And in this position, if we try and evict the knight, I think something nasty will happen. Check. And then here, knight h3, something nasty is happening to white. This knight takes f2 is difficult to parry. And black would be getting the pawn back with advantage. This position is just miserable. Surely. Miserable. In fact, we can even take this one. So yeah, the knight can't be kicked that easily. It's not a position I would like with white. So knight takes d3. Knight takes d3. And now Fischer plays f4. And apparently black is almost +2 here if he plays knight f2 check, according to the engine view, just taking this rook. Maybe black was afraid of Fischer's central construction. If we have a look at this, knight f2 check, why can't we just win this rook? I know the knight's going to be stranded. But here, okay, so d4. There might be a point to this. G5. So if takes, we can play h6. If g6, f6, we can bite this pawn chain to bits here tactically. Otherwise, we're going to open up the bishop, open up the rook. So this move would seem to be promising for black. If black didn't have g5, maybe this is the point of the rook sack. That, I don't know, it looks a little bit on the speculative side though. Let's just have a look at this. Castles, knight d2. We win this knight, so we're going to be the exchange down. Is this really worth it? Say takes here, takes here. Black's better there. Say we delay taking the knight. I don't know. It's a bit strange. It does seem like a really strange game. this rucksack idea. Apparently it's not +2 or +3, it's about +1. It's not so bad. White potentially is playing knight b3 c4 and is going to win that knight. It's going to be the exchange down, but yeah, for some reason black didn't want to go in for this line. Maybe he thought he trusted Fischer or something. After f4, instead of knight f2 check, he actually played bishop h6. I know, it's crazy. It's the unknown rook sacrifice no one knew about from Fischer's games. I know, it's mad. I don't know. Is everyone convinced this is bad for white? Sorry, does anyone think this is really good for white? This position here. We've got more centre pawns. We've got more control. We eventually win this knight. Okay, it's an exchange sack basically. It's a delayed exchange sack. Okay, we can look at it like that. So anyway, okay, bishop h6, not accepting that delayed exchange sack. And black is still better. Black's still better here, but not as much actually. Not technically, not as much. So I think the right move here in the circumstance, the choice between king c2 or king e2, for example, or knight a3. These are unpleasant choices. If king e2 takes here, we can snap up these pawns, and this looks very, very nice for black potentially. Maybe the bishop drops back there, and then we're gonna try and break the centre later, and we can even castle queenside. But Fischer played actually king c2, which I think is technically much stronger. He's avoiding the check, and he's trying to create a pin on the h6 bishop. So if knight takes f4, we have this useful pin, and white's immediately better with this pin. Everything is forgiven, and white is actually threatening g3 immediately. So this would be a real nuisance. This position, and if castling, well, castling is another interesting possibility for black here. He didn't use that to protect. He could have protected the knight with castling. He didn't use that. Black instead played knight takes c1, and the advantage seems to be slightly dissipating. It's less than half a pawn technically. I think probably we can. Now this is again mysterious. This is absolutely mysterious. It's shocking me. I think most people will consider taking on c1, right? If you take on c1, bishop takes f4, and then e5 is dropping actually, and this doesn't look too good. We can't play d4 because the bishop takes c1. What Fischer did in this position with the knight here, it's not actually going anywhere anytime soon except for e2. Fischer actually inserted a really cheeky move in this position. This is a really shocking game actually. It really is shocking how resourceful white is here. Can you see what white actually plays in this position? White's play here, if I give you 20 seconds, what would you play with white in this position? It actually matches the top move Stockfish the engine would play. Fischer played the top Stockfish move. What do you think that is here? Okay, it's incredible. It's incredible. Let me tell you this again. Maybe this is a good story for our own games. I'll tell you the story here. Let's just relax, right, about this position. Let's just relax. We've been wounded. We've just lost this piece on c1. Okay, right. So we've been wounded, right? We want to take this knight, but if we step back from it, does it matter if we take the knight now, or in a few moves. Does it really matter? Okay, the knight can't escape to these two squares. If it took here, it would activate the rook. The knight's only escape is e2. And actually, it would be more ideal, given that concrete variation, which is actually looking totally lost, by the way, it would be more ideal to be able to have an alternative for taking that knight out. So if you're relaxed about it, Fischer's move is just totally relaxed. It's rook e1. He's actually going to take the knight with king takes c1, or even the cheeky g3, and then take the knight at leisure without any downside to his position. So rook e1 here was played, rook e1, and black apparently should actually go for the a2 pawn from the engine perspective, should actually take out a2 now. If he takes out f4, then here we insert, you see this is a double attack here. We take time to insert g3. This is the genius of it. So we're not losing all our pawns basically. We insert g3. The knight is not going anywhere. I think it's taking advantage of that fact. The knight isn't going anywhere that significant. So long as we control the e2 square, take care of business over here first. Bishop drops back, and then we can take with either. Maybe, you know, the rook and or the king is fine here. Minimizing the damage, absolutely minimizing the damage. So that's a little bit of genius just right here to consider these things. That rook e1 is plausible. Maybe, you know, his opponent had gone into this entire variation on the assumption here, you know, that's the normal move. A normal move would have been played here. So king takes c1. It just doesn't work out that well. It really doesn't. This pawn's pinned. There's no d4. This is just losing the centre pawns. It's a totally miserable position. A pawn down. And, you know, the other way, if we're taking with this, it's even worse because we've got that pin here and we've got a double attack and a pin. You know, what do we play here? G3. Again, this is not looking good. So very, very nifty move here. This rook e1, very nifty to consider that sort of thing. The engine move, yeah, take out a pawn here. But even in this position, the engine in this position is would probably play what Fischer plays, which is not to take this. The knight again hasn't got any squares to move now apart from c3. We can actually maintain the pawn chain with g3 and let the knight take on c3. D takes. We maintain the pawn chain against the bishop. And we've also got potential things like this coming up, or even e6. So yeah, it's little finesses which help the survival chances in this position against black. So black actually castled queenside here, and it's now almost equal, theoretically equal. So from potentially being a rook down, we've reached an equal position. So has Fischer just swindled it to a draw here? After bishop takes f4, he's able to now make use of the knight protecting d2 just to play g3, kicking the bishop away from e5. And now he's looking forward now, even after unpinning, to d4 in this position. So we have a position where white has managed to equalize at move 20. Very tactically, it seems. e5 is a little bit vulnerable though. It is a dark square pawn. We see rook d5. And here now, curiously, b4 was played. Maybe try and discourage c5. So not playing for d4 just yet. After b6 we see a4 as if a5, yes, to try and increase the scope of the rook. Black played now a5. And white now took on a5. B takes a5. Rook e4. So he's going to be playing d4 soon, surely. Here, he does actually play d4. But, Okay, it looks as though white's kind of also got potentially here and here to hit this and maybe threaten even the check. So black reacts quite quickly now to hit white's pawn chain. Black plays c5. We have king d3. C takes d4, c takes d4. But now bishop g7 introduces a threat all of a sudden. Again, bishop takes e5. Using that pin. So the king sidesteps here. But again, here, this is actually a nice position for black. Black misses quite a useful punch here. Maybe king e3 was in fact a small inaccuracy from Fischer in the light of this. Possibly the engines indicate knight a3 or king c4. So king e3 might have been a slight inaccuracy. What would you play here with black? It seems black could have been in the driving seat again in this game. If he had played, it seems a very accurate move here. What would you play in this position? If you were playing black. Alright, now if you said f6, no, that's not really the point, because knight c3, yeah, that's okay, actually, because we can actually play this and temporarily, it doesn't matter about this position, but actually strong would be, really strong would apparently be f5. This wasn't played. f5 would apparently be really annoying for white. For example, if rook f4, we skewer. If rook h4, we lock in the rook on a silly square, and then we're going to play check later, and maybe bishop g5. So if white's forced to play e takes, then we target d4, and everything looks silly here. This rook looks silly on this diagonal. This pawn looks silly there. It just looks awful. This position is nearly 1.5 up for black, but it wasn't played. It wasn't played. Funny enough, black missed his chance, it seemed, for f5 here. He instead seemed to let white off the hook, let Fischer off the hook. He played bishop h6 check. Maybe there was a very good intention behind it, or maybe he's thinking he's going to go for a draw now with repetition. Fischer though, Fischer changes his move now at move 30. He doesn't go back here. Maybe he also realizes f5 is pretty dangerous in this position, to go back here to invite for a second time the possibility of f5 hitting him. So in this position, he actually plays king c4. But maybe black has realized now, that f5 is still strong in this position. Maybe not as strong as before, but still pretty strong. The king is a little bit more active over here for this f5 to be played now. But also it's hitting d5. There's another resource which is now available to white. He doesn't have to move the rook. If he moves the rook, there's other disasters I think that are about to happen. Bishop h6, end of game, d4 drops. So he has to play this move, knight c3, counter-attacking now. With a bit fortunate this game, he's able to counter-attack his king's on c4 here against d5. I know, it's a crazy game. e6. Now in this position, rook h4 is played, looking at h7, about to drop d4 it seems. g5, white takes on h7, d4 finally drops, and it's still looking pretty miserable for white. Black is a pawn up, and but at least the king's potentially active if it's not getting mated. So rook c1, check, king takes a5, getting a pawn from black. Rook c4, black is technically better here, of course, but white also has that rook on the 7th, and this looks as though there's some trouble potentially brewing up. Fischer doesn't mind an exchange of rooks here. knight e2, but check was inserted. Rook d5 check was inserted. Black is better. He actually played rook dc5 in this position. Maybe better is taking on c1. That looks as though that might be quite promising as well for the check. And bishop e3 hitting the knight, and this could start looking very, very unpleasant with this f pawn. Yeah, but black actually maybe played a bit inaccurately. After this check, he played actually rook dc5. So Fischer's fighting for his life again. He's actually worse in this position again, but he has got this a pawn and he has got a rook on the 7th. So it's less miserable than before. Rook takes c4, h4, trying to get past h pawn, giving up the a4 pawn potentially. Is that actually viable to take on a4? If rook takes a4 here was played, no, hg, that's okay. Instead, rook c2, and the knight doesn't really want to move here. The knight refuses to move. This g pawn looks quite promising. If the knight did move, let's say knight g1, then g4, and we're going to take here, and this is looking grim. The rook can always come back here for this one, etc., and we've got passed pawns there. So we instead, Fischer plays dynamically here after rook c2. A very, very fighting game. He plays h takes g5, giving up the knight, breaking up black's pawns. g6. So this pawn is salvation now. Now, if immediately rook g2, then g7 is going to be equal with the check here and taking here. Or even, it might even be better for white now. No, that might even be better for white. So it's tricky, but black plays check here. King a6. I think if king c6, there's a problem. There's a specific problem here. Check. Bishop d4 check. Rook c7. Yes, stopping the pawn advancing. Okay, so so we see this rook b2 check. We see king a6. And you might think, okay, so that's keeping control of b7. So there's still this g7 on the cards. Rook b4 now is played. So he's going to get rid of the a pawn, or he's going to come behind the pawn to rule out g7. So g7 has to be played now. But we finally reached equality again. So black gives up the bishop and takes on a4, near equality. We have this rook and pawn ending, which is easier to draw, basically. So Fischer's got the rook on the 7th. It's very difficult for white to win this. The engine's indicating now 0.00. He's in the safety zone. But what a dramatic game behind the scenes. And there's a few more rook moves like this. Rook e7 now, just basically offering a draw, basically. Here at move 60, a draw. Yeah, this game, you know, oh blimey, oh dear. No wonder no one's talked about this game. So this was against Milan Matulovic. Blimey. It seems white was on a roller coaster ride, a self-inflicted roller coaster ride, with this crazy idea of winning the c5 pawn early on. Live book. I mean, if we look at live book here, Queen e2 is a popular move, but players with white in this position do not play this plan. Funny enough, it hasn't been repeated that much to win c5. Funny enough, usually players with white castle here and play like this slowly, just for d4. This is a more usual method apparently. So we've got a kind of French defence with a fianchettoed bishop or something. This looks interesting. This is the kind of stuff. Yeah, Fischer did seem to play the opening on a kind of materialistic mission here, and he had the bind, which is reminiscent of binds Morphy had against his opponents. That D3 bind, and we have this episode here where he's offering basically an entire rook. I mean, this is absolutely incredible stuff. F4. F4. It's actually one of the top engine moves to play F4, believe it or not, as well. F4 or King C2. King C2. This just looks miserable for white. So yeah, not Fischer's best opening ever, I think, in this particular tournament. So black didn't go in for this. Yeah, he must have. But black has to play energetically here, to be fair. Because if black played some routine moves, I mean, just as an example, right? Let's just give black some routine moves and reach this position. We'll do away with the exchange sack. This evaluation here would be almost fine for white. It's only about half a pawn, or the structure is actually fantastic because it blocks in the bishop fundamentally. This would be, virtually equal, to be fair. So it's a grand conception, the rook sacrifice, but with the most accurate moves, it does seem as though it might have been unsound. If black plays f6 or g5, it starts to look a bit shaky. This g5 makes it look a bit shaky. That this kind of stuff, which engines would come up with. I think specific reasons for this. Maybe counterplay on the g file or something like here. This is better for black. If black plays very energetically, it doesn't matter about the knight being munched. There's a lot of play for the rooks. You see that white's centre could be collapsed, etc. And the knight could actually act as a desperado. It just seems a bit of a dodgy concept, but it requires extreme accuracy from black to try and win this rook and blow up the centre and activate the rooks. So yeah, he played bishop h6, but what was evidenced was genius now. After king c2, just the simple positions here to play rook e1. I think this is like genius, to take time over winning this knight, to minimise the damage with g3. So he's protecting e5. He's going to be shielding h2. But we reach an episode again where white was in trouble for like the second time, and it seems black missed a shot here with f5. This was a powerful shot as well. It just seems to leave d4 weak and white's pieces in the wrong places. And now it's like Fischer refused this position again. He instead saw this counter-attack opportunity on the rook on d5 here. And yeah, I mean, he was worse for most of this game. It wasn't such a convincing game. He nearly lost it. He fought very resourcefully for the draw. Very resourcefully. And I mean, this was genius as well. He couldn't have moved the knight back. He had to do that knight sacrifice. He had to make sure the rook wasn't stopping g7. So here, okay, so, and then he reaches a rook and pawn ending safety of a rook and pawn ending, which he can more easily draw. But what drama in this game. It's a draw, but what a dramatic draw. Do you agree? I don't know what you think. Dramatic draw, as draws go? Phew, blimey. I thought it was. I wasn't sure whether to try and cover 4 games this week. Actually, does anyone want another game this week, or should we just carry on next week? Carry on next week, or just one more? Unfortunately, it is a bit of a grueling game. Yes, what I was going to show you. So maybe we should try and keep Yeah, the session's about an hour max, I think. Yeah, I think. So maybe okay. So see you. I think we'll see. Carry on next. Oh dear, oh dear. It's really another gruesome game. I wasn't going to show you an easy game to show you. This is in brutal sequential order. Yeah, it doesn't matter how horrific, how complicated the games are, or even if they're draws. I was just going to cover them. Mind you, I feel the tea might have kicked in. The tea might have kicked in. I might be able to do it. I might be able to. And energy permitting. The play chess people were saying next week. It'll be on YouTube actually. If you want to see the next game, if you did miss it now, people on play chess, it will be on YouTube. kingscrusher. If I did cover it now. Okay, general vote on stream is one more now. So a quick vote. Those 4 playing now. There seems to be more actually. Is that the same person? No, it's the same person saying one more. Sorry. Can we do a quick vote here? Anyone desperate to carry on now? Yes. Honestly, this game we've just seen here, the full horror of it actually unraveled to me as well. I did actually play through these games beforehand, but the horror of it unraveled to me as well while going through it in more closely here. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, all right. Let's do it. Let's do it. So this one, Fischer is black. Yeah, it's not looking good. It's more than 40 moves. So I think I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Okay, Renato Naranja against Fischer. It was in round 8. C4, C5. Fischer plays the symmetrical English opening. I've got a bit of tea left, right. Knight C3, G6. Knight F3, Bishop G7. And to be honest, I hate playing these positions with black. I really hate playing them with black because white seems to get a comfortable position after D4. And I don't remember seeing that many Fischer games with this position. But to me, this position here is white's always got a small advantage. It's a nagging advantage, that D-file pressure. White's going to usually fianchetto. We see knight C6. White supports the knight on D4 with E3. But white is not going for the fianchetto. White's actually putting the bishop on E2. Both sides castle. Fischer plays knight takes D4 here. Queen takes D4. By the way, so Renato Naranja is a very strong Philippines player. I think he's won Philippines championships, etc. And he's played for their Olympiad team several times. I had a quick look at his bio. So white seems to have a comfortable position here and very, very solid pawn structure. The only issue at the moment is the bishop on C1. Is that going to be deployed on the fianchetto? Let's have a look. D6. The queen goes to H4. Now bishop E6 targeting the C4 pawn. Starting to. Rook D1. Okay, so Rook D1 is actually now threatening C5 immediately. But you might think, hold on a sec. Rook C8 should address that, right? It does. This is a reasonable move. This would be reasonable and about equal. Maybe. There's some tactical moves available for black as well. But Fischer actually played Queen b6. Funny enough, it looks kind of more natural in a way to play rook c8. He actually played Queen b6, so a little bit more tricky, it seems. Can white naturally play b3, or is there some disaster here on the diagonal? Let's just check this out here. In this position, actually, rook b1 was played. That looks a little bit on the cautious side. I'm not entirely sure there is a big problem here. Knight g4 hitting c3. We've always got knight a4 tempo gain on b6, and then we can play bishop b2. And it seems white's is very okay here. White would be very okay, more than okay. So that seems viable to play b3. The top engine move is actually to play b3 here, not minding knight g4. Okay. The other point here, by the way, if takes this is certainly, this looks very okay for black. So anyway, Queen b6, Rook b1, as though b3 and Bishop b2 to carefully challenge the bishop on the diagonal. Queen c5, so we're putting pressure on c4. And now here, I think it will be okay to play b3 still. Still okay. Maybe for some of the same reasons, or it's just an okay position for white still. But white played b4, which looks to be a little bit more on the aggressive side, but potentially loosening the structure. The structure seems softer. Queen f5 was played. So c4 looks, a vulnerability. e4, Queen e5. And now, eyeing the knight here, this is a little bit on the tricky side. It might be the case that Bishop b2, black might have resource for dark square control, g5. Where does the queen go? It would have to accept double pawns. This would be quite pleasant for black, and black's still got that in target. So actually, white here played Rook b3. This is probably a stronger move, a stronger idea. Rook b3. Bishop d7 now is played with the idea of, why Bishop d7? Hold on a sec. Bishop d7, because white is actually now threatening Bishop f4 to trap the queen. I think that's white's concept, that the queen needs a square, basically, in this position. So the bishop dropped back to give e6, I believe. If Bishop f4 now, then Queen e6, and that's fine. So yeah, Bishop d7 dropping back, but now we have f4. So white's gaining space, it seems, on both sides of the board very aggressively. Look at all these pawns. Wow, what is going on here? Why is white playing like this? Isn't it like succumbing to provocation? So Queen e6, only move. And white continues aggressively. And this game doesn't look like anything I was looking at earlier in brief. This looks like another nightmare game. What is going on here? Why is white seemingly playing like this? Like a caveman lunatic with all his pawns. He could have been content with a solid pawn structure with b3 earlier. But instead, he's trying to squish Fischer. So f5. And white technically is doing very well here. Engines like the white position. So has there been an over-provocation? Immediately, black would lose instantly, it seems, if he plays Queen e5. Again, we're back to our old friend Bishop f4. And this is horrible. This is absolutely horrible. Black's best with the queen traps is this is unpalatable to play like this. Just losing this pawn. We don't even have to take the queen. If we take here, there might be knight takes e4. This position is like a mate in 2 now. So yeah, it's unpalatable stuff. So he has to take with the G. He has to take with the G pawn. G takes F5. So white's doing fantastically well here after E takes. Queen takes F5. And now bishop G5 was played. This might lose the advantage slightly. White maintains. Whoops. White maintains some great possibilities, like knight D5 here, but possibly stronger was knight D5 immediately. Actually, knight D5 immediately, looking at E7, is troublesome for black. On knight takes D5, bishop D3, we've got a nice skewer here. And black has to play very, very carefully with bishop F6, queen H6. Very, very, very accurate play needed. Like this, yes, it's strange variations, but they favour white actually. So it seems white had a big advantage here in this particular position technically, with the move knight D5, just technically, for this skewering possibility. I mean, it's not often you have to lose the G pawn and weaken the diagonal, but bishop G5 was played. Fischer now plays H6, and white just takes on H6. So queen H7, yes, trying to get the exchange of queens. Bishop G5, the exchange of queens. So the defensive task, the mortality of the king, has been secured for a few moves now, and it's less of a big deal for white. So we can go back to torturing C4 now without getting mated, it seems. So here white plays bishop takes F6, and Fischer plays a now in this position E takes F6, which looks positionally suspect. It really looks terrible to play this. Just structurally. Now I wonder what's actually going on here. Why did he do this? If he played bishop takes F6, it doesn't seem as though this is a this is okay. This looks as though it's potentially equal, this position. It's opposite coloured bishops. I think the rooks might have been frightening here, but I'm not sure that they actually do anything. Maybe there's just king F8. This is okay. The king can just, I don't know, it just seems okay. The bishop's controlling H8 for some reason, and I don't understand particularly at this very moment. Fischer had played E takes F6. Does anyone think that is surprising, or do you think I've got the wrong game score? Would you really play E takes F6? E takes F6, anyone? Would you really play E takes F6 here? I mean, seriously. What's the idea here? E takes F6. I guess, you know, he wants like the bishop on the diagonal. I mean, let's have a look at rook takes D6. That looks like an obvious thing to look at. Then rook FD8. White is still a bit better here. White still, he can exchange off rooks. Black's pieces are active though. Black's looking forward to F5, and maybe this is the point that, you know, with the two bishops, with the dark square bishop, it might be okay. There's rook activity. This might be okay. Although in this position, a strong move apparently is knight b5. From an engine perspective, knight b5 secures white a good, healthy advantage. Like this. So say F5, and A5 might be a positional threat here to address. If we play knight takes D6 A5 with a bit of activity, but this pawn is not going anywhere, and white can actually play rook A3, prophylaxis against A5. Get rid of these arrows. So leaving knight takes D6 on the cards, and this seems positionally very painful for black. This position here, for example, Here we can have c5. But yeah, maybe a less accurate move was played instead of knight b5. White actually was content with playing knight d5. Still advantageous to white. We have rook fd8. Rook f3, torturing f6. King f8. And white wins that f6 pawn. I know it's activating the bishops potentially, but we've now got a past h-pawn runner. White is a pawn up, but there's compensation here. Rook ac8, that c-pawn is still vulnerable. Check, check, and now this was taken actually. Bishop takes c4. So we're back to the security zone of a rook and pawn ending. Maybe Fischer was aware of that famous quotation, all rook and pawn endings are drawn, so he didn't probably mind this position now. We're heading to this rook and pawn ending. But apparently he is quoted as saying about this game that he thought he was lost, at least at 1 or 2 points. I'm pretty sure that's the quotation I've seen for this game. So we have this rook and pawn ending now after the drama. Okay, rook takes b4. So yes, after the smoke's cleared, it looks as though there's they could shake hands here or something. The engine's indicating it's 0.00 actually. So at move 33, maybe Fischer started playing for a win here or something. So he's got the 2-1 here. White's got the 2-1 there. Let's see what happened. b5, rook a4. The game continued like this. The king got aggressive over here, but this is a good fortress situation, holding a2. And now the black king wants to climb in on the light squares, potentially, and it climbs in on the light squares. But here, white was very stubborn here. He played actually rook d2, and then they kind of agreed a draw. So he's maintaining his 2 pawns. If he takes here, this might actually be better. Well, he's losing a2 pawn. Pardon me, that's the point. And then we've got 2 passed pawns over here. It's not to do with these two, it's to do with this one. So he just maintains this fortress here with rook d2. And Fischer agreed a draw here at move 48. So that's another curious game. I suspect maybe in these early rounds Fischer was getting into the tournament a little bit more with each round. Because there is about to be carnage soon in the rounds coming up. We're going to have a look at. But yeah, this was round 8. So some dramatic draws there in round 7 and 8. Maybe unexpected that Fischer would draw with these 2 players that he did. Okay, so hope you got something from this. Just a quick brush through this game. It was very dramatic in its own right. Where, you know, white, this queen b6 didn't seem like needed. It seems a bit on the artificial side. The queens give tempo gaining opportunities to the opponents. Black could have just played rook c8, very simple, and you know it's not so bad to play like this. You know, knight d7, we can mess around on the dark squares. We can even play a move like b5 hit. Apparently this is really good here. You know, stuff like this is simple, but the way Fischer played it, he's getting his queen involved. Seemed a bit strange, and it almost totally rebounded on him with this b4. It's inviting the queen into the center of the board or around here to be potentially trapped. So white must have been getting excited around here. What on earth is this queen doing? You know, provoking weaknesses or something. What is it doing on f5? So this this provokes white to fling all his pawns to potentially trap the queen. Now this is a very strong move, rook b3, threatening to win the queen outright with bishop f4. So a very dramatic game here. The queen given the e6 square, And this f5 is now damaging black's king safety. It's lucky he wasn't shredded on this diagonal. You know, he had to take care with the g pawn. And this position gets very dangerous. Here there was knight d5 with the idea of deflecting and bishop d3. Very, very strong move this would have been, this possibility. Yeah, bishop g5 also, you know, dangerous. h6, maybe bishop f4 was slightly better, but here now Fischer had got back into the game a little bit. And now a strange looking decision. He could have just played bishop takes f6. A strange looking decision was played here. I don't know what he didn't like in particular about this. Maybe it's a bit passive, but it seems the king's not getting mated or anything. This is okay. This position here is equal. So apparently, you know, he didn't like this for whatever reason. He played with e takes f6. White could have technically targeted d6 and squashed a5 at the same time, coming up here with knight b5. And if a5 here, by the way, there was knight c7. Knight c7 is good. Yeah, what does black do there? b5. That's good. Yeah. So this looks horrendous, and he got away with it. Fischer got away with this structure. It seems he's transitioning soon into a rook and pawn ending, and he's fine. He's fine now. He's absolutely fine. He's equal. And quite a few moves were played after that, but white held the fortress. So a very dramatic game behind the scenes again. Draw at move 48. So yeah, see you next week. Hope you got something from it. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.